Hey everybody, we're here today to talk about how to choose the best bushcraft knife. A lot of the bushcraft type stuff, also kind of referred to as survival knives. To me, they're a little bit different, but a lot of that stuff is really a matter of personal opinion and what you plan on doing with it in the field. I'm not entirely sure that I love the idea of the term survival knife, just because any knife can become a survival knife if you put yourself in a survival situation. And quite honestly, some things have gone kind of epically wrong if you find yourself in an actual survival situation. A survival situation can come from an outside influence or outside force, something happening to you. But most likely, most survival situations come from some poor choices and potentially even some poor preparedness. Not having the right gear, maybe climbing a mountain or climbing rocks or doing something in a way that puts yourself in a bind, not having the correct footwear, or potentially the shelter, things like that, not being able to build a fire. A survival situation can even turn into a situation where you're just driving from one town to another through a mountain pass. You run off the road and all of a sudden it's a survival situation. So on the bushcraft side, to me, that's more of the stuff that you kind of do out in the field to practice survival type activities. A bushcraft knife, I would tend to say, would be a knife that you would take on like a TV show, like Alone, where you're going to be doing things with your knife every single day out in the field for a lot of different uses. So let's talk about how to choose an actual bushcraft knife. First and foremost, the knife has to just be sturdy. You have to have some size to it, and this knife has to be able to do some serious work. I'd say generally a blade around 5.5, 6 inches to up to 8 inches. I don't really think you want to be carrying a blade around that's over 8 inches long. It's a lot of blade to wield and to carry. The next thing to talk about is kind of sturdiness, the spine thickness. A lot of times I think companies get a little too carried away with that, and we end up carrying around a boat anchor in the field. I like an edge that's thin, that is easy to sharpen, passes through material easily, but in a bushcraft knife, you definitely have to have an edge that is tough and solid. And quite frankly, in a bushcraft knife, I'm a little less concerned about the length of edge holding ability, and I'm more concerned about the side of toughness. And that kind of goes into a heat treating conversation. Obviously you want it to hold an edge, but you're gonna wanna be able to pound this through wood, potentially pry on some things, and have this knife hold up to a lot of potential force that you put on it on the edge, or even some side loading on the blade. I'm holding our Super Cub knife. This is one that I've used. This would probably be as close to what we have as a bushcraft style knife. I've got some other knives sitting here. You could use this Stonewall knife in a lot of applications for a lot of those kinds of things, though I wouldn't say it's really kind of a bushcraft. This is our Knock-On XL. Which is very similar to our Super Cub. You could do a lot of bushcrafty things with it. A knife that wouldn't be considered necessarily as good of a bushcraft knife would be like this Bear Tooth that we have. This is a fleshing knife. It's a thin blade, flexible, and not necessarily designed for bushcrafty type stuff. In the field, you're gonna wanna be able to have a tip on your knife to perform different functions and be able to use a tip for different things that you might find yourself, different situations you find yourself in. Let's actually talk about now the handle. The handle is a very important part. If you're going to be, chopping wood or forcing your way through materials or doing a lot of heavy use, you're gonna want a handle that's comfortable, it's ergonomic. You should be able to hold your knife in either direction. And I like to be able to cap it with your thumb, so you can really get some force if you're digging with your blade, chopping ice, things like that. Also, with a bushcraft knife, some of the reason we want some length is we want to be able to baton that through wood. So that means, putting that blade on a piece of wood and then using a stick or a log or a rock or something to be hammering down on the spine of the blade to help pound down through a piece of wood. Let's talk about why you would be doing bushcrafty type things. There's a lot of people that like to go out on the weekend and actually go camping, go hiking, and practice survival type scenarios where they build shelters, they build fires, build traps and deadfalls and stuff like that. Generally, when you're out hunting and you're doing that kind of stuff, you're not focused on doing those activities per se. But at any point during a hunt, it can turn into a survival type situation where you would need to implement some bushcraft type skills. The other part of a blade for a bushcraft knife is how you carry it, the sheath. You should be able to carry this knife securely and have an accessible spot. Our clips, we can turn 90 degrees, you can clip them on backpacks, different stuff like that. So a sheath, to be able to also carry it safely where it's not jabbing into your body, is a very important part of the overall knife package. This knife you can't do this with, but a lot of people like to have a knife with a lanyard hole. We're actually developing a knife right now with that, so stay tuned on that. A lanyard a lot of times is something that you can put around your wrist and wrap a few times if this was the knife blade. And now you have control if you're chopping, that you don't lose control of that knife. You know, that's fine if you're in a chopping competition and whatnot. I tend to not be a big fan of a lanyard just because, quite frankly, if I lose control of this out in the field, I'm assuming I'm not around a group of people. I would prefer that knife to go away from me. If it's attached to my wrist and I lose control, it's now swinging around and it's potentially going to be jabbing into your own body. So we are developing a knife to where you can put your own lanyard on it. I tend to not be a big fan. The other thing I'm not a big fan about a lanyard is the fact that it can get caught on things and ripped out of a sheath, ripped off your body, stuff like that. So this particular sheath has one on it just for something we were doing the other day. But I don't suggest you really carrying a blade with a lanyard. Instead, I would suggest you carry paracord, actually a fair amount more than this, that you can use for a lot of uses. And if you decide you need a lanyard, you can actually put it on the knife and use it. So in a bushcraft knife, again, they need to be tough. They need to have some length. The handle needs to be ergonomic. You have to be able to carry it, baton it through some wood, chop, have a tip to be able to pry or to pull through materials. And it needs to be durable. The handle material on this is G10. It's very durable. I can pound on things, beat on the table, whatever you need to do. A very durable handle material that's non-slip. We leave our milling marks in these handles. That's a very important thing that I think a lot of handles are too polished. So carry a sharpening stone with you, even just a little stone to touch it up. Carry a nice solid knife like a Super Cub and you'll be good to go out in the field doing your bushcraft work.